A fine mist fell over the suburban houses, the dim yellow light from windows fogged with condensation flickering through the windshield as James Whitmore turned into the narrow driveway leading to his home. It had been nearly 3 months since he last held his daughter, 3 months stationed at a special training camp on the West Coast, just one objective: finish the assignment, come home. His rain-soaked backpack slapped against his back, his hand reaching for the spare key hidden under the porch light. The door opened without a sound and a wave of synthetic fragrance hit him, lavender and lemon, scents he never used in the house. The ceiling glowed softly under a row of white LED lights, the couch reupholstered, a candle burning steadily on the dining table. Then a blood-curdling scream tore through the air. "Daddy, Daddy." It was his daughter. Without missing a beat, James lunged forward, his hand grabbing the doorknob. It was locked. He stepped back, braced himself, and kicked hard. The door flew open, light from the hallway spilling into the room. What lay before him would paralyze him, pulling him into a nightmare far more terrifying than any battlefield. Inside, Emily was curled up in the corner, her face streaked with tears. Her nightgown was wrinkled, a faint red mark standing out on her left cheek as if it had just been made. Diane stood barely 2 steps from the child, still holding a small pillow as if she had just thrown it onto the bed. For a few seconds, all 3 of them stood frozen in silence. James dropped to his knees beside Emily. She recoiled slightly when he reached out, but didn't pull away. Her eyes stared blankly past him. Diane's voice, shaky but trying hard not to be, claimed Emily had just been messing around, slipped and fell. James didn't look at her. He gently pulled Emily toward him, checking the back of her neck, an old bruise. Her little hands were ice cold. He wrapped his jacket around her, holding her close. "You told me she was asleep," James said, his eyes still fixed on Emily. Diane's voice turned stiff. "She was asleep at the time." James picked Emily up. She didn't respond, her arms hung limp, her head resting on his shoulder as if she had no strength left. A single tear slid silently down her cheek, soaking into James's collar. Ricky and Mrs. Susan were standing at the top of the stairs, Ricky asking, "What happened?" James didn't answer. He walked steadily down the stairs, holding Emily in his arms. Diane moved to block him, but didn't dare. In the living room, James gently covered his daughter with a throw blanket and laid her down on the long sofa. He then turned back to face the 3 of them, frozen in place. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low and firm like a military command. No one said a word. He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. No carton of special milk, the kind Emily had to drink because she couldn't handle regular dairy. None of the familiar foods she liked were there. The little plastic owl cup, his daughter's favorite, was nowhere to be found. He went back to the couch. Emily was still lying there, eyes open, silent. James sat down and leaned in close. "Talk to me. What happened?" He kept his voice soft. Emily pressed her lips together and shook her head. James closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his first words were not comfort. "From now on, no one goes into your room except me. You understand?" Emily gave a faint nod, then whispered, "Are you leaving again?" That question, sharp and sudden, cut through his chest like a blade. "No," he said firmly. "This time I'm staying. I won't let anyone hurt you again." In that moment, James had no way of knowing that the promise he had just made, a father's final vow, would become the beginning of a pain so cruel he couldn't have imagined it in his darkest thoughts. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, staying there all night, her head resting against James's arm. He hadn't slept at all, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on her tiny face where the red mark had faded. When dawn lightened the sky, he gently carried her upstairs. He turned on the bedroom light to its dimmest setting, tucked the blanket around her, then pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Sliding his hand under the blanket, he quietly checked her joints, elbows, calves, wrists, the base of her neck, each movement careful not to wake her. Just below her left wrist was a greenish-purple bruise, indistinct but still there. Near the nape of her neck, close to her hairline, a faint round mark like an old scratch or a fingernail press. James stopped breathing for a few seconds, slowly pulled his hand back, stood up, and walked quietly to the kitchen when he heard the first clink of dishes downstairs. Diane was already dressed, her hair pinned up, a spotless white apron tied around her waist. Ricky sat at the table eating cereal, feet propped up. Mrs. Susan was pouring coffee, glancing at James with a small smile as if nothing had happened. "Want some coffee?" Diane asked. James shook his head. "Is Emily still asleep?" Asked casually. "She's tired," James said, his eyes locked on Diane's hands as she sliced butter. "What's that bruise on her cheek?" Diane paused for a split second, then kept working. "She probably fell yesterday. You know how she's always running around, I told you already." "And the mark under her wrist?" James asked again, his voice lower. Mrs. Susan sipped her coffee silently. "It's old, maybe from school, I don't know," Diane said, turning to face him, her expression neutral, even shrugging. "Or maybe from when the housekeeper was still here before she quit." The next morning, James took Emily to preschool. He said very little during the drive. Emily sat quietly, clutching the small stuffed bear he'd bought her for her 4th birthday, worn now, but held tightly as if it were the only thing left that still felt familiar. Bethany, the teacher, stood in the doorway, her expression faltering for just a second when she saw James. "Good morning, Emily," she said gently, crouching down. Emily didn't answer, just gave a small nod, her eyes avoiding everyone else's. James placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Go on in, sweetheart. I'm just going to have a quick word with Miss Bethany and then I'll come get you." Emily gave a faint nod and quietly walked into the classroom. When the door closed, James kept his eyes fixed on Bethany's face. "Miss," he began, his tone even. "While I was away, did you notice anything different about Emily? Any changes in her behavior or how she interacts with others?" Bethany looked uneasy. "Well, she's been quieter than usual, tends to sit by herself, draws a lot but won't share what she's drawing, doesn't smile as much either." "Less smiling, drawing alone, do you think is there anything that might be scaring her?" James asked, his gaze steady and unblinking. Bethany glanced toward the classroom, then turned back. "I think something's not quite right, but I can't put my finger on it. She doesn't react much when the other kids tease her or bump into her. Lately, she startles easily at loud noises. Have you ever seen bruises or anything unusual on her body?" James lowered his voice, sharper now, more focused. Bethany paused. "Yes, I saw a small scrape on her wrist once and a reddish mark on the back of her neck. I asked about it, but Miss Diane said Emily's clumsy, always tripping over chairs and desks." "You believe that?" James cut in. For the first time, Bethany met his eyes. 1 second, then 2. She shook her head very slightly. "I don't know. I don't have the authority to interfere in family matters." James nodded slowly, expression unreadable. He pulled out his wallet, took a business card, flipped it over, and wrote a number in ink. "If anything else comes up, anything at all, please call me." He slipped the card into her hand, firm but gentle. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, hands in his coat pockets, chin tucked down against the wind. That afternoon, on the drive home, he stopped by a park and bought 2 ice cream cones. Emily didn't eat hers, she just stared at it. "Tired, honey?" he asked. "No," Emily said softly. James looked into her eyes, then asked, "Did your stepmother hurt you?" Emily hesitated, then shook her head, then nodded. James didn't press her. After a while, Emily looked down at her hands and said softly, "My stepmom doesn't like me." But then she added, "But Grandma said, if I told you, you'd leave and never come back." James turned fully toward her, his gaze steady. "Who told you that?" "Grandma did, and my stepmom too." Emily looked up at him straight in the eyes for the first time that day. "I'm scared that if I tell the truth, you'll disappear." James let out a sigh. He set his uneaten ice cream down on the bench and reached out to pull her into a hug. Emily didn't hug him back, but she didn't pull away either. "Listen to me," he whispered close to her ear. "No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, I'm not going anywhere. Even if you're mad at me, even if you don't want to talk to me, I'll still be here." Emily gave a small nod, so small it felt like she was still holding back, even from her own hope. James decided to cancel his return to the unit. That morning, he sent an email requesting a 7-day leave of absence without giving a reason. He needed time at home, needed to see for himself what was going on, not through instinct, but through the truth. He didn't say much, just used the excuse of a headache, needing to rest, then pretended to be worn out and went upstairs, lying in bed all through lunch. The door was left slightly ajar, the curtains drawn, but his ears weren't resting. He heard every footstep on the wooden floor, the soft roll of a suitcase down the hall, the clinking of spoons and forks from the kitchen below. Around 11:30, he heard Emily's soft slippers shuffle to a stop near the kitchen. Then Diane's voice, low but clear enough for him to catch every word, dirtying up the floor again. "Just how far are you trying to push me?" No reply, just a few seconds of silence. Then Diane again, sharper this time, almost snarling. "You're lucky you still get to eat, to have clothes, to live in this house. Your mother dying was the best thing that ever happened." James opened his eyes. His heart gave one hard thump. He didn't rush down. Instead, he sat up, stepped quietly to the door, and cracked it open just a few inches, just enough to hear better. Emily's reply was barely a whisper, so faint it could only be heard in complete silence. "I'm sorry, I already cleaned it." "Shut up, clean what? You call this cleaning when there's still a puddle like this?" Diane's voice was cold, hard as stone. "If your grandmother sees this, you'll be sorry. Go get a rag, on your knees, clean it." No sound of footsteps running, just the soft click of a cabinet opening, then the quiet rustle of a towel being pulled out. Less than a minute later, another voice joined in. "Ricky, hey, the monster under the bed's hungry. If anyone disobeys, it'll drag you down and bite your legs off." "Got that, kid?" Emily's voice caught, then dropped to a whisper. "Please don't." "What? I was just kidding," Ricky scoffed, his tone sharp, eyes showing not a trace of remorse. "You're really scared? I figured you'd be used to it by now." James had gotten out of bed before the first word was even spoken. He descended the stairs without a sound, one hand gripping the wooden railing so tightly his knuckles went white. As he stopped in front of Emily's door, the last sound that echoed was the thud of something hard, plastic or a broom handle, falling and hitting the floor. "Dad's home," he said, not loud but clear and sharp like a command. Silence dropped like a heavy blanket. Ricky shot to his feet, hurried toward the door, stammering. "Oh, you're up. I was just watching the girl for Diane. She spilled some water, so I told her to clean it up. I was just messing around, didn't think she'd freeze up like that." James blocked the doorway, unmoving. He looked at Ricky for exactly 2 seconds, then stepped past him without a word and walked straight into the room. Emily was huddled in the corner, a filthy, soaking rag in her hands. She was still in her old pajamas, hair messy, eyes downcast. A thin film of soapy water glistened on the floor with dried suds crusted along the grout lines. James knelt down and gently took her hand. The skin was red, not cut, but rough in patches, marks not from heat, but from long, repeated scrubbing under too much pressure. Diane stepped in, eyes tight but smiling. "Anyway, what's going on? I didn't know Ricky was up here. I was in the kitchen. He must have seen her spill the water and came in to tease her. You know how Ricky is always running his mouth. The girl's just sensitive, that's all." James didn't answer right away. He carefully pulled the rag from Emily's hand as though afraid he might hurt her more. She didn't react. Her gaze stayed low. No flinch, no retreat, nothing. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Emily nodded. It was a slow, mechanical nod, more like something memorized than something felt. James clenched his fists in his lap, the tendons in his hands tightening. He stood up, eyes locked on Diane. "Get out, both of you." Diane hesitated for a beat, as if calculating her reaction. In the end, she just shrugged. "Okay, but you should remember us. He's always been prone to overreacting." I'm not saying she didn't feel anything, but sometimes she imagines things. That's what the therapist said, remember. James looked at her for a few more seconds. Diane's face showed no fear, and her eyes held that annoyingly sincere look. For a moment, he wasn't sure anymore. Was he overthinking all of this? Were the things he noticed just the result of stress after being gone so long? Or did Diane truly believe what she was saying? Ricky rolled his shoulders and gave a mocking grin. "Don't worry about it. Kids these days, every one of them is a scaredy cat." James didn't respond. He just waited for the two of them to leave the room, then quietly closed the door behind them. He sat down, not right next to Emily, but at an angle across from her, leaving just enough space so she wouldn't feel cornered. In the silence, his eyes wandered around the room. It was small, painted a soft pink, once Emily's little world, but now the walls were bare. No pictures, no drawings like before. At the foot of the bed, her old stuffed animal lay crooked. He bent down and picked it up. The belly had a small tear with a few square folded pieces of paper tucked inside. James unfolded one. The first was a rough crayon drawing of a house with 3 people, a man, a child, and a faceless woman. The second was scrawled in pencil, shaky and uneven, "Don't tell." James didn't say a word. He slipped the papers into his shirt pocket. When he turned back, Emily was still in the same spot, hadn't moved an inch. He sat beside her, not touching. "If there's anywhere you want to go, just tell me. Anywhere at all." Emily turned her head slowly, her eyes no longer carrying the light a 5-year-old should have. She didn't answer. But for the first time, she shifted just a little closer to him, only a few inches, just enough for James to know that somewhere in the shadows of her mind, there was still a way out. James left the house before the sun had managed to pierce through the morning mist. He told Diane he had something to take care of, no explanation, no details. She nodded, almost looking relieved. Emily was still asleep, or at least lay motionless beneath the thick blanket. His first stop was Mrs. Charlotte's house, the elderly neighbor who lived just beyond the back wall. She opened the door after peeking through the curtain, looking surprised to see James standing in the yard. "Oh, James, it's been a while. I've got a few questions, and I hope you'll be honest," he said directly. Mrs. Charlotte invited him into the sitting room and poured some tea, though her hand trembled slightly. When James asked about Emily, she hesitated. "Every night I hear crying, soft, more like a whimper. Sometimes it sounds like someone calling for their mother, but I figured maybe she was sleepwalking. Kids have bad dreams, don't they? Have you ever heard Diane raise her voice?" "Yes, but not all the time. She's got a temper, sure, but she's all smiles in public, you'd never guess." She stopped, setting her hand on the teacup. "I used to suspect something, James, but I was afraid. Mrs. Susan, she's the one who's active in the community, knows the former sheriff. I'm just a retired old woman. What could I do?" James thanked her and stood to leave. Mrs. Charlotte held his hand and said softly, "If you need someone to speak up, I'm not sure I can swear to anything, but I won't stay silent anymore." His last stop was the private clinic where Emily had been seen a few times over the past year. Dr. Fields was reviewing files when James arrived. He welcomed him in with a polite expression, carefully avoiding eye contact. James got straight to the point. "Doctor, have you ever seen anything unusual on Emily?" Fields cleared his throat, turned to the computer screen, and pulled up the records. "She's been noted as rather sensitive. A few mild sore throats, one case of skin irritation, but nothing serious. No diagnosis that would suggest abuse." "Nothing," James said, his voice lowering, "or nothing you dared write down." Fields looked up, met his eyes. "James, I'll be honest, Diane is very much in control. Every time she brought the girl in, she described the symptoms before I could ask, spoke for Emily. She came across as the ideal mother, confident, informed. I don't have the authority to interrogate a parent." James clenched his fist, then let it go. His voice was quieter now. "You're a doctor, you do have the right to ask questions." Fields didn't respond. That afternoon, James returned home. He pulled into the driveway and sat behind the wheel, unmoving, his mind tangled with too many threads. Bethany's words, Charlotte's evasive glances, Dr. Fields' careful silence. Everyone knew, each and every one of them, but no one did a thing. He unlocked his phone, meaning to go over his notes again, when he noticed an unread email. The sender was anonymous, just a line that read, "For the real father." The message was brief. If you're truly his father, ask Emily about the corner of the closet where she hides every night. James read it 3 times. No signature, no attachment, but every word felt like a blade driven straight into his heart. He turned off the phone, stepped out of the car, and headed straight to Emily's room. She was coloring and didn't look up when he came in. "Emily," he said gently, sitting down beside the bed. "Daddy wants to ask you something. The corner of your closet, is there something special about it?" Emily looked up. Her eyes went wide, the pupils quivering just a little. She didn't speak, but for the first time that small face showed a flicker of panic. 12:30 that morning, all the neighbors' lights were out. Mrs. Susan had locked up early. Ricky had gone to his room at 9:00, taking his game console and headphones with him. Diane said she'd stay up to watch TV, but the living room lights had been off since 11:00. James had driven out right at midnight, making sure everyone in the house believed he had something urgent to take care of. He circled the neighborhood, then cut his headlights, eased back onto the street, and parked at the far end of the alley, locking the car manually under the faint glow of the street lamp. He pulled a baseball cap low over his forehead, zipped his jacket up to the neck, and made his way quietly around to the back of the house. He climbed over the wooden fence, the one he'd fixed himself just last year. The back door was locked, but the ground floor window to the storage room still had a way in. He knew exactly how to unlatch it from the outside, just a small blade and a gentle twist, and the window swung open. James slipped inside without a sound, his feet touching the floor as lightly as breath. The house was pitch dark. He didn't turn on any lights, relying on memory to guide him upstairs. Every stair was familiar. He knew which ones creaked and which didn't. 10 steps, then a left turn. Emily's room was on the right, the door left slightly ajar. James stopped and listened. No crying, no voices, just one sound, quiet and strained like someone trying to stifle a breath. A faint whimper from inside. He pushed the door open, still no light. Only the soft glow from the hallway stretched across part of the wooden floor. Emily wasn't on the bed. James stepped in, then paused at a soft noise from under the desk. A subtle rustle like fabric brushing against wood. He moved toward it, bent down. Emily was sitting in there, her back against the wall, arms wrapped around a worn-out stuffed animal. Her head hung low. The toy bear's belly had been slit open, the seam still unstitched. Her eyes were wide, catching the dim light, but dry. James turned fully toward her, sitting close, his hand resting gently on her back. He kept his voice slow and steady, every word clear. "No, never, no matter what happens, I'll never be mad at you. I'm right here." Emily leaned in, pressing her head against his shoulder. She didn't cry, but she trembled slightly. Her small hands clutched his coat as if she feared he'd disappear if she let go. James stayed like that for a long time. His heartbeat slowed, but inside his chest, the storm hadn't passed. He knew this moment, when Emily leaned in to be close to him, when she chose to speak instead of staying silent, was a sign. The final door had opened. He sat there beside her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders. With the other, he pulled his phone from his pocket. He switched on the recording function. Not to capture her words, she hadn't said much, but to preserve the silence that was speaking louder than anything else. After he helped Emily back into bed and tucked the blanket around her, he left the room, closed the door gently behind him, and made a call. "I need you," he said as soon as the line connected. "Middle of the night. I can't wait. I have reason to suspect child abuse. I need gear and possibly a surveillance warrant if this goes further." The voice on the other end dropped low. "Been a long time since I've heard you sound this serious, James. This time it's real, Marcus. It's my kid." James stepped out to the backyard, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, lit one. He didn't smoke it, just held it between his fingers while it burned. The smoke drifted in the wind, thin as a strand of memory. The torn photo of Alina was still in his jacket pocket. On the floor inside, 3 adhesive bandages were sealed in a plastic bag for evidence. He knew he couldn't turn back now, not out of anger, but because of his 5-year-old daughter, the one who had learned to sit in a dark closet just to feel a little safer. The next morning, James drove to the old phone repair shop near the bus station where Marcus had arranged to meet. No sign, no security cameras. The metal shutter was rolled halfway up, revealing a dim yellow light inside and the soft hum of an old fan. Marcus was already waiting, sleeves rolled, face as unreadable as when he was deep undercover. "Got something for you," Marcus said, laying 3 small items on the table. A charging plug with a hidden mic, a button-sized camera, and a tiny recording chip embedded inside the head of a stuffed teddy bear. "This one's for Emily," he said with a dry smile, pointing to the bear. "When she hugs it, it records everything around her. Battery recharges automatically through a body heat sensor." James nodded without asking further. Carefully, he packed each item into a shockproof pouch, then left through the back door. That afternoon, when Diane brought Emily home from school, James was out front changing the porch light. Ricky sat in the living room, over-ear headphones on, eyes locked to his phone. No one paid attention as James slipped into Emily's room to check on a broken outlet. He plugged the charger into the corner socket, checked the signal on his phone app, then placed the teddy bear neatly beside her pillow. The whole thing took less than 8 minutes. The evening passed with an eerie calm. Diane joked around in the kitchen making spaghetti, James's old favorite. Ricky dragged his feet doing the dishes, and Emily sat quietly at the dinner table, so well behaved it felt almost wrong. James didn't say much, but his eyes stayed on the clock, waiting for midnight. 2:00 a.m. The room was completely dark, lit only by the glow of James's phone screen. The first audio file had just finished downloading. He plugged in his headphones and hit play. The first sound was footsteps, then a soft whimper from Emily. Diane's voice came through sharp and crystal clear. "Spilled the water again, huh? How many DMN times do I have to tell you? Useless, just like the one who gave birth to you." Then came a smack, unclear if it was a dish or something harder. Emily didn't cry, didn't beg, only the sound of her breathing, broken and trembling. Then Ricky's voice came through, mixed with the sound of a door creaking open. "SHH. This is our little secret, remember? Anyone who tells will get dragged away by the monster." Emily didn't answer. A long silence followed. Then came the slow, dry click of the door closing. James pulled off his headphones and shot upright in bed, his heart pounding like a hammer. He turned on the small lamp, plugged in his phone, and opened the monitoring app. The camera had captured Emily's room at night from the corner near her headboard. Not clear enough to make out faces, but enough to mark the timing. He called Marcus. "I need you to hear this. Can't wait." On the other end, he heard coffee being poured. Marcus listened to the first part of the recording. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, then his voice came low and firm. "It's enough to start, but not enough to convict. Diane will say he's just disciplining a stepchild. Ricky will laugh it off as teasing a kid. You know how this game is played." James pressed his fingers to his forehead. "So what do I do?" "Wait until..." "No," Marcus cut in. "You have to be patient and precise. If you move now, they'll disappear and take Emily with them. I've seen it happen before." Silence. James sat down, his hand clenched. "So what's the next step?" "I'll clean up and store the evidence. You act like nothing happened. Smile, eat dinner, say thank you, and keep recording." Next day, James had dinner with the whole family. He told an old joke from his army days that made Ricky laugh. Diane played along too, even refilled his wine glass. Emily sat beside him, quiet, but she glanced at her father, not a look for help, a look of waiting. That night, Emily talked in her sleep. James was reading the paper in his room when he heard her whimpering. He opened the door and stepped in, whispering, "Daddy's here." Emily turned over, still asleep, her voice trembling in a dream. "Mr. Ricky turned off the light, wouldn't let me breathe. I was scared, I didn't dare scream." James clenched his fists. He didn't wake his daughter, but in his mind a decision had just formed, sharp and undeniable, like an internal alarm bell blaring. The next morning, James installed a small camera underneath the dining table. Another one was hidden inside a fountain pen he always carried with him. Every time Ricky stepped into Emily's room, James noted the time. Whenever Diane yelled, he recorded her tone and attitude, and every night he sent the data to Marcus, encrypted, stored on 2 separate hard drives, one of which sat inside a bank safe registered under Marcus's name. Emily didn't know, Diane didn't know, Ricky didn't know. James had become a man with 2 faces, a quiet father and a silent sentinel. When James sat alone in his car past midnight, listening to the 3rd recording, the one where Emily only breathed softly as Ricky mentioned the monster under the bed, he knew he was reaching his limit. Not because he lacked evidence, but because every second he waited was another day Emily had to live with a fear she didn't know how to name. That afternoon, James drove Emily to Grandma Charlotte's house, using the excuse that Daddy's got to take care of something out of state for a few days. Charlotte didn't ask much. She just looked into his eyes, gave a small nod, then gently reached for Emily's hand. The little girl stepped inside without looking back, as if she already understood that something was shifting. As the car pulled away from the gate, James didn't roll down the window. He needed to stay focused. Last night in a recording, Ricky had whispered to Emily, "Grandma will make you stay quiet if you talk." James knew it was time to face the place where it all began. The first person James went to see was Annie, an old buddy from his military days, now working as a private investigator. He pulled up to her discreet office, a nondescript building tucked away in an industrial park. The blinds were drawn, and a single, unlit neon sign read, "Investigations." He knew Annie wouldn't ask questions he didn't want to answer, and she wouldn't hesitate to help him expose the truth. This was no longer just about gathering evidence. It was about protecting his daughter, no matter the cost, no matter the enemy. The silent vow he made to Emily that first night was about to become a devastating reality for those who had caused her pain.